At the end of the last ice age, something extraordinary happened. Vast sheets of ice that had covered continents began to melt. Oceans rose by more than 100 meters. Entire coastlines disappeared, forcing ancient populations to move inland. What they left behind now lies buried beneath mud, sand, and water. Fragments of walls, columns, and foundations that seem older than any civilization we officially recognize. Across the world, stories remember that flood. The Epic of Gilgamesh speaks of gods drowning a corrupted humanity. The Hebrew Genesis describes a deluge that erased the old world. The Hopi tell of waters that swept away a civilization built on arrogance. Aboriginal Australians recall how rising seas divided their land. Ancient China, too, preserved the memory of Yu the Great controlling endless floods. These myths are not identical, yet they converge on one theme: a catastrophic flood that reset history. Geologists and climatologists now know that between 12,800 and 8,000 BC, Earth experienced sudden pulses of melting known as meltwater events. Sea levels rose in violent surges. River systems were redrawn, deltas drowned, and once dry plains became seabeds. Archaeologists find traces of lost coastlines off India, Japan, and the Mediterranean that fit this timeline. Whether myth and geology describe the same event is still debated, but the overlap is too close to ignore. If a flood that vast occurred, what civilizations might it have erased? The familiar narrative says agriculture began around 9000 BC, cities around 4000 BC. Before that, humans were small tribes of hunters and gatherers. Yet scattered evidence challenges that simplicity. Sophisticated stonework dated earlier than expected, astronomical alignments at sites with no writing, and construction techniques that appear abruptly, not gradually. Some researchers argue that the oldest megalithic monuments could be remnants of cultures that thrived before the flood. They point to patterns: massive stones weighing hundreds of tons, cut and fitted with precision, temples aligned to solstices, and myths claiming that gods or wise ancestors taught the first builders. If those myths preserve even fragments of memory, the Great Flood was not just a disaster. It was a dividing line between two human epochs. Stone, unlike flesh or wood, endures. Erosion may scar it, but it does not vanish easily. That endurance might explain why so many of the world's oldest mysteries are carved in rock. From the Andes to the deserts of Arabia, from the highlands of Anatolia to the forests of Japan, the same signature appears: enormous stones shaped with care that our current timeline struggles to explain. Perhaps those stones are not just relics. They may be records, silent witnesses to an age erased by water and time. Modern science measures sediments and isotopes. Ancient storytellers measured memory in myth. Between them lies a puzzle. If the flood erased the builders, why did their monuments remain? If mysteries like these fascinate you, take a moment to like this video. It helps more explorers find these forgotten stories. And tell us below, where do you think humanity's first civilization truly began? In the next part, we descend into Egypt's sands to a structure hidden beneath a temple, a place that may have survived that boundary between worlds: the Osirion of Abydos. Beneath the temple of Sacsayhuamán in Abydos, Egypt, lies a chamber that doesn't fit the story told in textbooks. The structure is called the Osireion, a granite-lined hall buried below ground level, surrounded by water that seeps naturally from the Nile. Visitors who descend into it today often notice something strange. It feels older than everything around it. The Osirion is built from enormous granite pillars, each weighing up to 100 tons, cut with sharp edges and set together without mortar. Unlike most Egyptian temples covered with hieroglyphs and painted reliefs, its walls are plain, smooth, and minimal. The style doesn't match the decorative artistry of the New Kingdom period, when Pharaoh Seti I reigned. Instead, it looks like the work of engineers who valued geometry and mass over ornament. Mainstream archaeology dates the Osireion to around 1290 BC, built as a symbolic tomb of Osiris, but several physical clues raise doubts. The stone shows deep water erosion, similar to what appears on the Sphinx enclosure, marks that suggest long exposure to rainfall or flooding, conditions that ended thousands of years before dynastic Egypt existed. If true, the Osireion might not be a temple built by Seti I, but a restoration of something much older that the pharaoh later adopted. Egyptian myth itself hints at this possibility. In the old stories, Osiris was not just a god of death, but the bringer of civilization, the one who taught agriculture, order, and architecture after chaos. The texts speak of the followers of Horus, semi-divine beings who ruled Egypt before recorded history. Some ancient lists call them the Shamsu Hor, rulers who reigned for thousands of years before the first dynasties. If the Osireion honors Osiris, perhaps it was built in memory of those early gods, or even by them. Archaeologists have long debated whether Egyptian engineering evolved solely within the Nile Valley, or whether it inherited ideas from a forgotten past. The Osireion supports the second view. Its proportions are precise. Its foundation sits below the current water table, implying either a different climate or river level when it was built. Some engineers argue that constructing it at such depth would have been illogical for Seti's era, when simpler surface temples dominated. Geologists studying the site find that the stone used, Aswan granite, had to be quarried and transported hundreds of kilometers. Moving blocks of that size through the desert, lowering them into a subterranean pit, and aligning them perfectly would challenge even modern cranes. No papyrus record or inscription explains how it was done. The structure's purpose is also uncertain. The flooded chamber in its center could be symbolic, a representation of the underworld, or practical, meant to harness the natural flow of groundwater. Some researchers speculate that it once served as part of a hydraulic system or even a resonance chamber designed to amplify sound within the granite walls. Whatever its use, it required knowledge of engineering far beyond ceremonial architecture. What makes the Osireion significant in this larger search for pre-flood civilizations is not just its age, but its anomaly. It doesn't belong. It sits beneath the timeline, like a page from an earlier chapter accidentally left in a newer book. Every precise cut, every smooth corner, and every unexplained erosion mark points toward a legacy that Egypt inherited rather than created. If the Great Flood truly marked a boundary in human history, the Osireion could be one of the few structures that crossed it, built before the waters rose and later rediscovered by the pharaohs who claimed it as their own. Next, we'll travel across the ocean to the mountains of Peru, where stones fit together so tightly that even a sheet of paper cannot slip between them. What connects the hidden chamber of Abydos to the fortress walls of the Andes? High in the Peruvian Andes, above the city of Cusco, lies a wall that bends the mind. The fortress of Sacsayhuamán looks simple from a distance, grey zigzagging terraces of stone. But as you approach, the scale becomes overwhelming. Each block weighs up to 200 tons. They are cut with multiple angles, each matching its neighbour perfectly. No mortar between them, no gaps. The stones interlock like a puzzle designed by someone who understood the physics of earthquakes long before seismology existed. Mainstream archaeology attributes this work to the Inca roughly 600 years ago. Yet that dating relies on surface artifacts, not on construction evidence. The Inca themselves, when asked by early chroniclers how they built such walls, said they didn't. They inherited them. They called the ancient builders the ones who came before. Modern engineers studying Sacsayhuamán struggle to explain how such precision was achieved using only bronze and stone tools. Even with today's equipment, lifting and shaping stones of that size would require cranes and laser measurements. The blocks are not uniform, each one is a unique shape, yet all fit together with almost mathematical perfection. The joints curve in 3 dimensions, resisting both time and tremors. A few hundred kilometers away stands Ollantaytambo, another enigma. Its wall of the 6 monoliths contains 6 massive granite blocks, each weighing around 50 tons. The nearest quarry lies across a river and up a steep mountain, 7 kilometers away. To move them, workers would have needed to lower the stones down one slope, cross the river, and then haul them up another incline, a task nearly impossible without modern machinery. And yet the stones are there, set upright in perfect alignment. Traces of incomplete work at the quarry show grooves and cut marks that suggest advanced techniques, not chiseling, but grinding or even softening of stone. In Andean legend, the god Viracocha gave early people knowledge to shape stone as clay. Some archaeologists dismiss this as metaphor. Others note that in many sites across the world, from Egypt to Arabia, similar myths describe builders who could manipulate rock effortlessly. This global echo raises a question central to our theme. Could the methods of shaping and assembling megaliths represent an inherited technology preserved through myth after a great catastrophe? If an earlier civilization existed before the flood, perhaps the Inca and others merely repurposed what remained. At Sacsayhuamán, seismic studies reveal that the walls move slightly during earthquakes and then settle back into place, a feature of deliberate design. The curved joints distribute pressure and prevent collapse. Such understanding of dynamic load behavior suggests knowledge of physics far beyond what we assume of Bronze Age cultures. Archaeologists have proposed more conventional explanations: wooden rollers, manpower, and patience. But none convincingly demonstrate how to fit stones of irregular shape so precisely without cutting them on site, in position. Even experiments using replicas often fail to reproduce the same seamless contact. If we look at the Inca as custodians rather than creators, the picture changes. They could have found remnants of an older fortress, repaired and expanded it, and woven it into their own culture. Oral traditions mention giants who moved stones by singing to them, or architects of light who disappeared after a great deluge. Beneath the myth may lie a simple truth. The builders had knowledge that later generations no longer understood. Yet Sacsayhuamán and Ollantaytambo are not the Andes' only mysteries. Farther south, on the high plains near Lake Titicaca, lies a site that pushes the question even further: Tiahuanaco and its adjoining complex, Puma Punku. The ruins there are scattered across the Altiplano like a dismantled machine. The precision of the stonework is staggering. Blocks carved from andesite, some with interlocking H-shapes cut to tolerances within a millimetre. They are fitted with drill holes, grooves, and joints so perfect they look machined. And yet they are thousands of years old, long predating the Inca. The stones themselves are magnetic, suggesting that the builders understood polarity, or at least noticed how the material responded to natural forces. Some of the H-blocks appear to have been part of a modular system, like prefabricated components for a structure now destroyed. Their arrangement implies the builders worked from a geometric plan, using ratios and alignments that mirror astronomical principles. According to local Aymara legends, Tiahuanaco was built by the gods themselves in a single night, before a great flood covered the earth. When the waters receded, the city was left in ruins. The story parallels the biblical flood, the Sumerian deluge, and the myth of Viracocha walking west across the Pacific after reshaping the world. Modern excavations suggest that Tiahuanaco once sat on the shore of a much larger Lake Titicaca, whose level has since dropped dramatically. Sediment analysis reveals marine diatoms, saltwater organisms, embedded in its ancient layers, implying that the lake, and possibly the region itself, experienced catastrophic upheaval. If true, These geological shifts might explain why the once functioning complex now lies fragmented, its massive stones thrown about like toys in a storm. When viewed together, Sacsayhuamán, Ollantaytambo, and Tiahuanaco, a pattern emerges. The same polygonal precision, the same lost technique, the same myth of gods or giants building before a flood. These were not isolated projects, but manifestations of a shared tradition, one that valued permanence and alignment above decoration. The walls of the Andes do not just survive. They endure earthquakes, erosion, and centuries of human reinterpretation. They seem built to outlast everything, including memory. The question that remains is why. Were these fortresses, temples, or markers of an older knowledge that their creators knew would one day be forgotten? The idea of stone as message, not monument, begins here in the mountains of South America, where the builders shaped rock as though it could think. As we move eastward, the same kind of precision reappears in an unexpected place, Japan. There, two massive monoliths, one that seems to float and another carved like a ship, tell the same silent story. Could the engineers of the Andes and the artisans of Asia have shared a common legacy before the world was divided by rising seas? In the wooded hills of Hyogo Prefecture, Japan, an immense granite block rests above a small pool of water. Locals call it the Ishino Hoden, the floating stone. It weighs around 500 tons, about the same as 3 fully loaded jumbo jets, yet it appears to hover. Only a thin column of stone, hidden by the surrounding pool, supports it. The illusion is unsettling, a megalith that seems to defy gravity, carved with clean planes and perfect angles that modern masons admit would require heavy machinery. A few hundred kilometers away, in Nara Prefecture, stands another anomaly. Masuda no Iwafuni, or the Rock Ship. The massive block measures 11 meters long, 8 wide and 5 tall, shaped into a form that looks engineered rather than natural. Its top surface bears 2 symmetrical square depressions, as if once used to anchor something metallic or architectural. Archaeologists call it a tomb, an astronomical marker, or a base for some unknown structure. But no evidence supports any of these theories. No tools, no inscriptions, no cultural layer that clearly dates its construction. What ties these Japanese megaliths to the global mystery is their isolation in time. They appear suddenly, without precedent or successors, as though fragments from an earlier world. Japanese historical records, which are otherwise meticulous, make no mention of such works. The oldest local myths describe them instead as gifts from the heavens. Folklore tells of beings who descended on clouds of light and shaped the stones with a single touch, leaving behind objects of power before vanishing when the world was covered in water. Some geologists suggest that these stones were carved using techniques of the Kofun period, around the 3rd century AD. Yet the workmanship far exceeds what is seen in any verified Kofun structure. The surfaces are almost mirror smooth, corners are sharp and true. The masons either possess tools harder than granite, or a method of abrasion that has not survived in historical record. What's more puzzling is the absence of debris. No chips, dust, or fragments surround either monument, a fact inconsistent with traditional carving, which produces large amounts of waste. This suggests the stones were not shaped where they stand, or that the process itself left no trace. Both options lead to uncomfortable questions. Could these megaliths belong to an earlier culture, one disrupted or erased by catastrophic floods that Japan's own mythology recalls? The Kojiki, compiled in the 8th century, recounts a time when the gods unleashed waves and storms that reshaped the land. Some researchers see in these myths a cultural memory of post-Ice Age sea level rise, when much of Japan's coastal plain was submerged. Seen through that lens, Ishino Hoden and Masuda no Iwafune might not be isolated puzzles, but remnants of a pre-flood civilization whose architecture Japan later inherited in silence. If similar techniques appear in distant Peru or Egypt, geography may not have been the barrier we assume. It's possible that before the flood, coastlines, now drowned, formed a continuous network of builders, exchanging knowledge across what we think of as separate worlds. Whether those builders used lost tools or principles of geometry that allowed them to shape stone with extraordinary precision remains open. What endures is the same signature seen elsewhere: mastery of form, absence of explanation, and complete silence in the historical record. When early explorers of these Japanese stones compared them to the works of South America and the Mediterranean, they noticed something subtle: the same intuitive balance of weight and void, the same respect for geometry as a form of stability. It was as if these structures were not designed to impress gods or kings, but to endure whatever was coming. From these quiet hills of Japan, the trail of this lost engineering now leads west again, to a site where endurance took another form: colossal blocks stacked to the sky in the ancient city of Baalbek, Lebanon, where the line between myth and mechanism blurs completely. In Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, surrounded by hills and vineyards, rises one of the world's most baffling ancient sites, Baalbek. Today it is famous for its Roman temples dedicated to Jupiter, Bacchus, and Venus, built around 2,000 years ago. Yet beneath those Roman structures lies something older, larger, and infinitely stranger: a foundation made from stones so massive that even modern cranes would struggle to move them. 3 of these limestone blocks, known as the trilithon, each weigh around 800 tons. Nearby, in the quarry, rests another block, the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, estimated at over 1,000 tons. For comparison, that's roughly the weight of 2 Boeing 747s carved from a single piece of rock. The stones are fitted together with remarkable precision. Even today, not a blade can fit between their edges. Roman builders clearly built upon this platform, but they didn't create it. Ancient writers like Pliny the Elder already noted the mystery. The foundation was there long before Roman times, and no one knew who laid it. The style and scale have no match in Phoenician, Canaanite, or Hellenistic architecture. There are no tool marks that explain the method, and no inscriptions naming the builders. Modern engineers have tried to reconstruct how such stones could be moved. Even with steel cables, pulleys, and modern machinery, shifting a 1,000-ton block across uneven ground would be a formidable challenge. The quarry lies nearly a kilometre away, slightly downhill, but the foundation itself sits on higher ground, which means the builders somehow hauled uphill stones heavier than anything used in recorded antiquity. Several theories attempt to explain the feat. Some propose that the blocks were rolled on wooden rollers, but Lebanon's ancient forests would not have produced trees thick enough or strong enough for that load. Others suggest sledges pulled by thousands of labourers, yet the logistics remain impossible. Experiments with smaller replicas show that even a fraction of the weight would sink into the soil before moving a metre. Local folklore offers a different kind of explanation. For centuries, villagers told of giants who once lived in the valley, beings of great height and power who could lift stones as children lift pebbles. Some traditions identify them with the Nephilim, the offspring of gods and mortals mentioned in the book of Genesis. According to these tales, the giants built Baalbek as a fortress or platform before a flood destroyed their world. Later civilizations, finding the ruins still standing, reused them. Archaeologists dismiss the legend, but quietly admit that the engineering puzzle is real. If not giants, then who? If not machines, then what? The precision of the cuts suggests advanced planning and a high understanding of load distribution. Some researchers have speculated that the massive base served not as a temple foundation, but as part of an earlier platform, possibly designed to bear immense weight or resist earthquake movement. The cultural memory of such a construction lingers in nearby mythology. The region's name, Baalbek translates roughly as City of the Lord Baal. Baal, the storm and fertility god, was said to command thunder and lightning, forces often associated with celestial power. In ancient times, storms were both destructive and creative. They destroyed worlds and cleansed them for renewal. The idea that Baalbek's foundation predates the flood aligns perfectly with this symbolism, a platform raised to withstand both time and water. When viewed alongside the sites of Japan and Peru, Baalbek fits a pattern. Colossal stones, inexplicable techniques, inherited myths of divine builders. The consistency hints at more than coincidence. It suggests that these far-flung projects might share a common origin, not in geography, but in memory. The larger question then shifts. What were these immense foundations meant to support? Temples? Machines? Or perhaps something simpler? Monuments designed to endure whatever cataclysm the builders foresaw. Baalbek's foundation seems to say that its creators expected survival only through permanence. They built as if the ground itself would change, as if they were preparing for the earth to be shaken, flooded, or reset. If we follow that thought, the next step takes us upward and outward to ancient observatories where builders turn their attention from the earth to the sky, measuring time itself through stone. On the windswept plateau of the Golan Heights lies a massive ring of stones few people have ever heard of. Locals call it Rujm el-Hiri, the heap of the wild cat, Baalbek. From the ground it looks like rubble, piles of basalt scattered across a barren field. But from the air, its design comes alive. 5 concentric stone circles, perfectly aligned, radiating from a central mound. The structure covers an area more than 150 meters across and contains over 40,000 tons of rock. Archaeologists date it roughly to 3000 BC, though even that is uncertain. What is clear is its precision. The outer walls align with the sunrise on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. On that morning, sunlight passes directly through the eastern entrance and lights the center of the mound. This exact alignment suggests that the builders were not farmers stacking stones, but astronomers tracking time. Yet almost nothing else is known. No tools, no carvings, no written record. The basalt is too hard to shape easily, and the surrounding landscape offers no clear evidence of a settlement. Whoever built Rujm el-Hiri poured extraordinary effort into a structure that appears ceremonial or astronomical rather than practical. Similar mysteries appear elsewhere. Far to the south, deep in the Egyptian desert, another site, Nabta Playa, shows the same alignment. There, upright stones mark solar positions, and nearby carvings depict cattle, stars, and symbols of fertility. The area is now desert, but during the late Neolithic, it was a savanna dotted with lakes. People gathered there to observe the heavens long before the pyramids existed. These sites point to an early pattern. Humanity's oldest monuments are often calendars in stone. They track solstices, equinoxes, and star risings that signaled planting or migration seasons. But some alignments go beyond the practical. In many cases, the accuracy is so exact, within a fraction of a degree, that it implies centuries of observation. Such dedication suggests that these ancient builders were not simply measuring time, they were preserving knowledge across generations, anchoring the movements of the heavens in something that would survive catastrophe. Local folklore around Rujm el-Hiri adds another layer. Among the Druze and Bedouin, legends speak of giants or ancient priests who built the circles to communicate with the stars. Others say it marks the burial place of a powerful king who died before the flood. These myths may sound fanciful, but they echo stories found worldwide, from the astronomer priests of Mesoamerica to the star watchers of Polynesia. Modern archaeoastronomers have begun to notice recurring motifs among these sites: circular layouts, solar corridors, and an obsession with the cycles of light and darkness. These are not isolated inventions. They suggest a shared mental architecture, a worldview that saw survival not just in strength, but in memory, in pattern, in the predictable dance of the cosmos. Why would early cultures put so much effort into aligning stones with the sky? One possible reason lies in trauma. After the abrupt climate shifts of the Younger Dryas, the world became unstable. Seasons changed, coastlines vanished, and survival demanded understanding the heavens. The sun and stars were constants when everything else shifted. By fixing them in stone, ancient builders could impose order over chaos, and perhaps ensure that if another catastrophe came, future generations would know when and why the world had changed. The circles of Rujum-el-Hiri and the stones of Nabta Playa stand as the earliest physical proof of that idea. Humans building not for shelter or rule, but to preserve the rhythm of the sky itself. They watch the sun not out of worship, but out of necessity. In the next chapter, we follow that idea westward, to the edge of Europe, where the same instinct to trap sunlight took on a new form. Stone passages that light up only on the shortest or longest day of the year, monuments that still sing to the light. In the quiet fields of southern Spain, near the town of Trigueros, a long earthen mound rises gently above the plain. Beneath it lies the Dolmen de Soto, one of Europe's most remarkable megalithic tombs. At first glance it appears simple, a corridor of upright stones leading to a small circular chamber. But at dawn on the spring and autumn equinoxes, something precise happens. The first light of the rising sun cuts directly through the entrance, travels the entire length of the passage, and illuminates the inner chamber in a sudden golden glow. That flash of sunlight, lasting only minutes, was no accident. The alignment required detailed astronomical knowledge and patient observation of the horizon over many years. The builders, whoever they were, left no writing, but they left a message. Light returning to darkness, the renewal of time. More than 2,000 kilometres away, in Ireland's Boyne Valley, stands another monument that works on the same principle. Newgrange. Older than Stonehenge and the pyramids, it is a vast mound of earth and stone, 80 metres wide, built around 3200 BC. Like Dolmen de Soto, it hides a long, narrow passage leading to a cruciform inner chamber. Every year, at sunrise on the winter solstice, a narrow beam of sunlight enters through a small opening above the doorway, the roof box, and illuminates the chamber deep inside. For the rest of the year, the tomb remains in total darkness, but for that one morning, the rising sun pierces the mound, flooding it with light. Modern visitors who witness it describe the experience as almost electric. It connects the living to a rhythm older than civilization itself. The carvings on Newgrange's stones, spirals, zigzags, and concentric circles, echo patterns found at Dolmen de Soto and other Neolithic sites. Their repetition suggests not mere decoration, but a coded system of meaning. Some archaeologists interpret the spirals as solar paths, others as symbols of life cycles or water currents. Whatever their exact meaning, the carvings reveal a shared language of energy and motion. Both Dolmen de Soto and Newgrange belong to what researchers call the Atlantic megalithic tradition, stretching from Iberia to the British Isles. Yet the consistency of orientation and geometry hints at something even broader, a worldview that reached beyond Europe. These monuments were not random burials. They were devices of light, structures that synchronized human life with the movement of the cosmos. The engineering involved was far from primitive. Aligning an enclosed passage to capture a single sunbeam on one morning out of the year requires precise surveying, exact positioning, and centuries of accumulated sky watching. For a society without written calendars, this was how memory was preserved, through architecture that performed the story of the heavens. It also shows continuity with what came before. In Part 6, Rujm el-Hiri's basalt rings track the summer solstice. Now, in Spain and Ireland, we see the same concept refined into an intimate scale. The light not just observed, but invited inside. The builders transformed stone into a medium of communication between earth and sky. In both places, local folklore long described these monuments as dwellings of ancient gods or doorways to other realms. Only later did archaeologists uncover their astronomical precision. The legends, it seems, preserved truth in symbolic form. If we look closely, the pattern repeats worldwide. Monumental works aligned to the sun and stars, built with accuracy that implies deliberate preservation of knowledge. It may have begun as a way to mark seasons, but over time it became something more, an act of resistance against forgetting. As Europe's megaliths trapped the returning light, across the ocean other builders worked with the same intention. But instead of stone, they shaped the earth itself. In the heart of North America, mounds and serpent effigies still trace the paths of the sun and moon with equal precision. In the rolling hills of southern Ohio lies a shape so vast it's only fully visible from above. A coiled serpent stretching nearly 400 meters, its open jaws encircling an oval form. This is Serpent Mound, one of North America's greatest earthworks. Made not of stone but of layered soil and clay, its curves flow with an elegance that feels almost alive. When archaeologists surveyed it with modern instruments, they discovered something astonishing. The serpent's head aligns with the sunset on the summer solstice, while its coils match lunar and equinox positions across the horizon. Thousands of kilometers away, other mounds tell similar stories. The Cahokia Mounds in Illinois, once forming the center of a massive pre-Columbian city, are arranged with geometric precision. The largest, Monk's Mound, stands nearly 30 meters high and covers more ground than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Near it, archaeologists found circular arrangements of timber posts, wood henge, designed to mark solstices and equinoxes. These ancient observers track the sun's movement with a level of accuracy rivaling Old World sites. Further north, the Newark earthworks form perfect circles and octagons spread across 4 square miles of Ohio's landscape. Their design reflects lunar cycles so precisely that the alignments correspond to the moon's 18.6-year orbit. Such precision could only have come from generations of careful observation. These earthworks were not simple ceremonial sites. They were calendars, maps, and repositories of knowledge built by societies who understood the sky as part of life's rhythm. Without metal tools or writing, they shaped entire landscapes to mirror celestial order. Soil became their canvas, the planet itself, their monument. For a long time, scholars viewed these sites as isolated achievements of regional cultures. But the deeper the studies go, the more patterns emerge that connect them. Circular geometry, alignment to solstices and lunar cycles, and myths that describe serpents, floods, and renewal. Among the Shawnee and other tribes, legends speak of sky beings who taught the ancestors how to build and how to watch the stars so the earth will stay in balance. Just as Rujm el-Hiri and Newgrange were designed to mark the turning of the seasons, these North American sites capture the same cosmic logic. The builders of Serpent Mound may have looked to the heavens for stability after upheaval, perhaps remembering an older catastrophe passed down in story. Many Native American traditions describe floods that wiped away earlier worlds. These were not moral tales, but histories, echoes of real events remembered through geometry and ritual. In the soil, archaeologists find layered evidence of repair and modification, meaning the mounds were maintained and realigned over centuries. This was not static architecture, but living astronomy, a way to keep the connection between sky and land intact. The question of origin remains open. Were these designs rediscoveries, independent reinventions of an ancient principle, or the faint continuation of a global system of knowledge carried by survivors of an earlier age? The absence of stone doesn't make them less advanced. It only shows adaptation to the materials available. Where basalt and granite were scarce, earth itself became the medium. The same intent runs through every site, to measure time, preserve balance, and link human life to the cosmos. Whether in rock or soil, the principle was the same: harmony through observation. But what happens when the harmony breaks? When the skies themselves change and the watchers face what they feared most, the return of the waters. Next, we move from lands that watch the heavens to cities now hidden beneath the sea, where the flood myths may finally meet their evidence. Off the coasts of India, Japan, and the eastern Mediterranean, divers have discovered the outlines of cities, walls, stairways, and pavements lying silent beneath the sea. These are not random rock formations. Their symmetry, tool marks, and orientation reveal the work of human hands, yet they lie dozens of meters below present sea level, in places that would have been dry land before the end of the last ice age. Near the Indian port of Dwarka, archaeologists mapped submerged ruins stretching for miles along the seabed. The site includes massive stone blocks arranged in linear patterns, ancient walls, and what appears to be a harbour. Samples recovered from the area have been dated to around 9,000 years ago, long before India's known civilizations. Ancient Hindu texts describe a legendary city of the same name, said to have been swallowed by the sea after a celestial war. The description matches the geography with eerie precision. Thousands of kilometers east, off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, divers found an even more dramatic structure. A stepped pyramid carved directly into bedrock, complete with terraces, sharp corners, and a staircase leading upward into what was once open air. Scientists still debate whether it is entirely man-made or a natural formation later shaped by human hands. But its features, right angles, platforms, and carvings resembling stairwells, are difficult to explain as pure geology. Farther west, near the island of Arwad off Syria's coast, underwater surveys have revealed sections of megalithic walls now submerged several meters beneath the Mediterranean. These blocks, carefully cut and fitted, resemble masonry seen at Baalbek and other ancient sites. Their position suggests that when they were built, the shoreline extended much farther out, before sea levels rose dramatically between 10,000 and 8,000 years ago. Taken together, these discoveries challenge the standard timeline of civilization. If these structures are genuinely as old as they appear, then organized building, and possibly urban life, existed long before the Sumerians, Egyptians, or Maya. The flood myths of every continent might then be more than stories. They might be memories of cities drowned when the glaciers melted and the oceans surged forward. Geological records confirm that during that period, sea levels rose by over 120 meters. It didn't happen overnight, but in several sharp surges, Meltwater Pulse 1A being the largest. Each surge would have flooded coastlines, displacing entire populations and erasing settlements. For survivors forced inland, the memory of the rising sea would have felt like a divine punishment, a story too vast to forget. When archaeologists overlay ancient flood legends onto maps of these submerged ruins, the patterns align. Myths from Mesopotamia, the Pacific, and South Asia all describe shining cities lost to the waters. They differ in names and gods, but not in essence. The flood, in every version, resets the world. Humanity survives, but its memory is fractured. What makes these underwater sites important is not only their age, but their implication. Civilizations may have developed along coasts that are now deep underwater. What we think of as the beginning of history might simply be what was left after the flood receded. This idea does not claim a single global empire. Rather, it suggests multiple advanced coastal cultures, connected through trade or shared necessity, all swept away by the same event. The evidence may still lie below, in drowned deltas and continental shelves that have never been fully explored. Every few years, new sonar scans reveal more. Lost harbours, walls, and roads on seabeds once thought barren. The more we find, the clearer it becomes that the sea is both a destroyer and an archive. The next story doesn't lead us inland just yet, but far out, across the endless blue of the Pacific. There, on a remote volcanic island surrounded by thousands of kilometres of open ocean, stand the silent giants of Rapa Nui, faces carved from stone, half buried and half forgotten, gazing inland as if guarding the memory of a world the waters erased. Far across the Pacific, thousands of kilometres from any continent, rises a small island of volcanic rock, Rapa Nui, better known as Easter Island. From its cliffs and grassy slopes, nearly 900 massive stone figures gaze inland, their long faces and heavy brows catching the light of the setting sun. These are the moai, monuments carved from tuff, a compressed volcanic ash, each one weighing from 10 to more than 200 tons. Most people recognize the moai by their heads, but excavations show that many have full torsos buried beneath centuries of soil and ash. When the islanders first raised them, these statues stood upright on stone platforms called ahu, their coral eyes staring across the land. Over time, wind and erosion covered their bodies, leaving only faces visible, silent witnesses to a mystery still unresolved. According to radiocarbon dating, most statues were made between 1250 and 1500 AD, yet oral tradition speaks of something older. The islanders' myths tell of a first people called the Hanau Epe, the long ears, tall beings of great strength and knowledge who arrived from a sunken land in the west. They taught agriculture, astronomy, and navigation, then vanished after a great conflict. Later generations carved statues in their image to honour them. Whether these stories recall real ancestors or mythic teachers, they echo the same theme heard across the ancient world: giants or godlike visitors who shaped the early age of humanity. On Rapa Nui, this legend feels especially tangible. The moai's sheer scale makes them seem almost alive, their gaze eternal, as if they remember something no one else does. The logistics of building them remain puzzling. Quarry marks at Rano Raraku show hundreds of partially carved figures, suggesting a large organised workforce. But moving them across rough terrain, some for kilometres, without wheels or beasts of burden, challenges every theory. Island tradition says the statues walked. They were rocked forward by ropes and chants, moving upright as though animated. Experiments with replicas have proved this motion possible, but the symbolic idea lingers. The moai moved because they were given life. Some researchers see in this an echo of a deeper memory, a recollection of technologies or methods long forgotten, carried across oceans by seafaring cultures whose roots reach back to the time before the flood. The Polynesians, among the most skilled navigators in history, may have inherited fragments of that lost maritime knowledge. Rapa Nui, lying at the farthest edge of the Pacific, could represent the last outpost of that memory, a place where the story of the builders of Lemuria survived not in writing, but in stone. The island's isolation makes the moai even more mysterious. Genetic studies show that Polynesian settlers arrived from the west, likely from the Marquesas, around the 12th century. But small traces of South American DNA in ancient remains suggest limited contact with the East, with the Andean world across the ocean. Sweet potatoes, native to South America, were present on Rapa Nui before European contact, proving that trans-Pacific exchange occurred long before modern times. Whether trade, drift, or deliberate voyaging, this connection mirrors the larger theme of the megalithic network, ideas and symbols spreading across vast distances. Like Baalbek's trilithons or the walls of Sacsayhuamán, the moai are feats of coordination and intention, built to endure. Their purpose, however, was not defense or shelter. Each statue represents an ancestor, a guardian linking the living to the divine. Together they form a network of eyes, a civilization's way of ensuring it would not be forgotten even if the world around it changed. When European explorers first arrived in the 18th century, they found the Moai toppled, the society diminished. The island had suffered ecological collapse, deforestation, and internal strife. Yet the stones remained, their buried bodies still intact, their faces still calm. The message, if there is one, might be this: knowledge can vanish, but the memory of its bearers endures if carved deeply enough into the world. Standing among the statues, surrounded by the endless horizon, it's easy to feel that Rapa Nui was once part of something greater, a bridge between continents, a fragment of a civilization that knew both the sea and the stars. The next story rises from the water's edge into the thin air of the Peruvian highlands, where ancient towers stand untouched by time, monuments that seem to remember those who vanished when the flood came. High above Lake Umayo in southern Peru, on a windswept peninsula surrounded by cold blue water, stand dozens of cylindrical towers called chulpas. They rise silently from the rocky ground, some reaching 12 meters high. Each tower is built from perfectly cut blocks of volcanic stone, fitted so tightly that no mortar was needed. The place is known as Sillustani, and while archaeologists classify it as a burial ground, almost everything about it raises questions. The precision of the stonework is remarkable. The blocks curve gently inward as they ascend, creating a taper that stabilizes the towers against earthquakes. Even today, most remain intact despite centuries of exposure to storms and seismic activity. Inside, narrow passageways lead to small chambers where mummies were once placed in fetal positions, surrounded by offerings. But the quality of construction is far beyond what would have been necessary for simple tombs. The indigenous Aymara and Quechua peoples tell stories of an earlier race, the Gentiles, tall, powerful beings who lived before the sun rose for the first time. According to legend, these ancient builders were destroyed by a flood of fire and water that covered the earth. Only their stone towers remained. To this day, local villagers avoid the site after dark, saying the place belongs to the old ones. Archaeologists date Sillustani to around 800 to 1200 AD, but the engineering hints at something older. The lower foundations show greater precision than the upper repairs, suggesting that later cultures rebuilt over ancient cores. The difference in workmanship is clear. Older stones are smoother, heavier, and fitted with near-mechanical accuracy, while later additions look rougher. This layered construction mirrors patterns seen elsewhere in the Andes, where pre-Inca foundations display techniques lost by later civilizations. Beyond its architecture, Sillustani's location holds meaning. The towers sit on a high plateau encircled by water, a natural mirror that reflects the sky. Archaeologists have noticed that some of the towers align with the horizon where the sun sets during the winter solstice. For cultures that viewed death as a passage, such alignments may have symbolized the journey of the soul, descending into the underworld as the sun sank, then rising again with dawn. If this interpretation is correct, Sillustani was not merely a necropolis, it was a statement about continuity, the belief that life and death follow the same cycles as day and night, flood and rebirth. That theme appears again and again across the world, in Egypt's Osiris myth, in the Aztec fifth sun, and in the flood legends of Asia. Each speaks of destruction followed by renewal, the death of one age giving birth to another. The towers themselves, sturdy yet hollow, express this duality. They reach upward yet enclose emptiness, as if designed to bridge earth and sky. Their rounded forms differ from the angular walls of Sacsayhuamán, suggesting a shift in symbolism, from defense to remembrance. Geological studies around Lake Umayo show signs of dramatic water level fluctuations thousands of years ago. Periods of sudden flooding and rapid retreat shaped the landscape long before the Inca era. It's possible that earlier settlements were submerged or abandoned, leaving later builders to find and reuse their ruins. If so, the legends of the Gentiles could preserve a distant memory of people who witnessed those floods. Survivors, or victims of a catastrophe now lost to time. Viewed through this lens, Sillustani becomes part of a wider pattern. Whether in the Andes, Egypt, or Mesopotamia, the oldest monuments seem less about religion and more about endurance. They are attempts to mark existence against the forces that erase it: water, time, oblivion. In Peru's high air, these towers still face the lake, their openings turned toward the rising sun. No inscription names their builders, no record explains their purpose, yet the geometry, the myth, and the setting all whisper the same idea. The flood may have ended an age, but memory continued in stone. From these towers of the highlands, we now cross into the desert, a place where stone itself appears to have been split by a single perfect line. In the vast desert near the oasis of Tama, Saudi Arabia, two sandstone boulders stand side by side, perfectly divided by a razor-straight vertical cut. Each half balances delicately on a small pedestal of rock, separated by a gap so narrow and uniform that it looks as if sliced by a machine. This strange formation is known as Al-Naslaa. For centuries, travellers crossing the desert stopped in astonishment, wondering who or what could have cleaved solid stone with such precision. At first glance, Al-Naslaa appears almost artificial. The surface of the cut is smooth and even, running from the top of the formation to the sand below without deviation. Geologists propose natural explanations: a fracture formed when the rock shifted due to temperature changes or minor seismic activity, later widened by erosion. But even they admit that the result is unusually perfect, too consistent, too straight. Nature tends toward chaos. This line looks deliberate. Ancient petroglyphs cover the stone's outer faces, drawings of camels, hunters, and symbols dating back several thousand years. Their presence proves that people knew this place long before modern times. Yet none of the carvings mention the split itself. Either it predated them, or it was so familiar that it needed no explanation. Among local Bedouin tribes, the story is very different. Legends speak of a time when the desert was fertile and green, before a great flood reshaped the land. They say the stone was cleaved by divine will to mark the boundary between two worlds, one that existed before the catastrophe and one that came after. Some even call it the Gate of the Ancients, a remnant of a vanished civilization punished by the heavens for misusing knowledge. Whether myth or metaphor, the symbolism fits. The split seems less a geological accident and more a monument to division, the separation of eras, of technologies, of civilizations. On one side lies the world that remembered, on the other, the world that forgot. If we step back, Al-Naslaa connects to a broader pattern seen from Peru to Egypt: precise stonework existing in places where conventional history cannot explain it. In each case, the skill or purpose of the builders has been lost, leaving only artifacts that seem far ahead of their supposed time. Some researchers propose that these remnants belong to a culture that existed before the last major floods, when now arid deserts were grasslands and trade routes crossed what is now sea. Satellite imagery and geological surveys of the Arabian Peninsula reveal that thousands of years ago, rivers and lakes once dotted the region. Rock carvings of fish and aquatic animals, now found deep in the desert, confirm that memory. As climate changed and waters withdrew, entire populations would have been displaced. If advanced settlements once thrived there, their traces could have been buried by sand or destroyed by the same tectonic shifts that created the split at Al-Naslaa. The idea of stone softening or cutting with sound appears in Arabian folklore, just as it does in South American legends. In both, ancient people claim their ancestors could shape rock through resonance, vibration rather than brute force. Modern science hasn't validated that claim, but acoustic experiments show that sustained frequencies can indeed fracture certain minerals. Whether coincidence or forgotten technique, the parallel is hard to ignore. Standing before Al-Naslaa, the desert hums with silence. The two halves seem frozen mid-separation, as if caught in the act of dividing. Sand gathers at the base, wind scours the gap clean, and the sun moves across its sharp face like a blade of light. If the earlier towers of Peru spoke of endurance, this stone speaks of interruption, a civilization split, its knowledge divided by catastrophe. It marks a threshold in the story of the ancient world, where human memory fractures just as this rock did. Beyond Arabia lies another threshold, one that leads not to open desert but underground. In the next part, we descend into the mysterious Longyou Caves of China, vast halls carved with precision into solid rock, untouched by light or record, as if a civilization sought to hide its achievements from the flood that followed. In the quiet countryside of Zhejiang province, eastern China, the land gives way to something no one expected. Beneath fields and ponds, hidden for millennia, lie the Longyou Caves, a labyrinth of immense underground chambers carved directly into solid siltstone. They were discovered by accident in 1992, when villagers drained what they thought were small lakes and found perfectly sculpted caverns beneath. So far, 24 caves have been found, each one large enough to hold an entire cathedral. The walls, ceilings, and pillars are covered in uniform chisel patterns, diagonal grooves running with machine-like precision, identical from chamber to chamber. No soot stains darken the ceilings, no debris or tools have ever been found, and no ancient text mentions their creation. China's meticulous historical records, which document construction projects for thousands of years, are silent about the Longyou Caves. Geologists estimate the caves could be over 2,000 years old, possibly older. Yet even with that conservative date, the sheer labour required to carve them defies explanation. Each chamber would have demanded the removal of thousands of cubic metres of rock, tens of thousands of tons, with nothing but hand tools, if we assume the standard picture of ancient technology. For all that effort, there are no tombs, no temples, no inscriptions claiming ownership, only patterns, precision, and silence. Standing inside one of the chambers, you immediately sense intent. The surfaces are deliberate, not random. The angles are symmetrical. The columns are evenly spaced. The acoustics are flawless. When sound echoes through the hall, it lingers, vibrating in a pure tone that feels tuned. Researchers from Chinese universities have noted the cave's unusual acoustic behavior. Certain frequencies amplify dramatically, suggesting that resonance may have been part of their function. If so, these were not quarries or shelters. They might have been designed to manipulate sound, water, or energy in ways we don't fully understand. Some scholars have compared them to the subterranean complexes found in Egypt, hinting at a shared knowledge of underground architecture across distant lands. The absence of soot may be the most mysterious clue. Ancient builders needed light to work, yet no trace of smoke remains. Either they used mirrors to reflect sunlight deep inside, or they had another form of illumination, one that left no residue. Without written records, it's impossible to say, but the question remains: how did they carve darkness itself into geometry? Local legends offer fragments. The people of the region tell stories of an ancient empire that hid from heaven after a great flood. They built beneath the earth to escape the judgment of the gods, carving halls of safety while the surface drowned. When the waters receded, they vanished, leaving only the echo of their chisels. The Longyou Caves stand apart from most ancient monuments because they reverse the pattern of human ambition. Instead of reaching for the sky, they retreat into shadow. They are not monuments to power, but to secrecy, evidence of a culture that chose to conceal rather than proclaim its knowledge. Their design suggests planning on a grand scale. The caves are separated by thin walls, yet none collapse into the others, implying careful surveying. Drainage systems within them show that the builders understood how to manage groundwater. Even by modern engineering standards, the stability is exceptional. Some researchers suspect that the caves might connect through passages still buried, forming an entire subterranean network. Ground-penetrating radar has detected anomalies nearby, hints of undiscovered chambers. Whether they are natural or artificial remains unconfirmed, but the idea that more lies hidden underground fits the cave's enigmatic purpose. Taken in the wider context of pre-flood architecture, the Longyou Caves might represent the final expression of a recurring theme: knowledge preserved through concealment. Where the builders of Baalbek and Newgrange sought to endure through visibility, here the aim was the opposite: to survive through disappearance. If the global cataclysm truly erased civilizations, then perhaps the Longyou builders anticipated it. They withdrew into the earth to outlast the water above, creating one of humanity's first archives of stone. From these silent halls, we return to the surface and cross continents again, to the ancient hills of Anatolia, where the oldest known temple on Earth was not destroyed by the flood, but deliberately buried before it. In the southeastern hills of Turkey, where dry plains stretch toward the Euphrates, archaeologists uncovered something that should not exist. Beneath layers of soil and time stood a complex of massive stone circles, carved pillars, and animal reliefs, built around 11,600 years ago at the dawn of the Holocene. This site is Göbekli Tepe, Potbelly Hill, and it rewrote what we thought we knew about civilization. Before Göbekli Tepe's discovery, the accepted model of history was simple. Agriculture came first, cities followed, and temples appeared last. But here, the sequence is reversed. People who were still technically hunter-gatherers built the first known monumental sanctuary on Earth. They moved stones weighing up to 20 tons, shaped them into T-shaped pillars, and arranged them in circular enclosures aligned to stars and solstices. They carved foxes, lions, vultures, snakes, a bestiary of memory preserved in limestone. Even more astonishing, the site was deliberately buried after centuries of use. Around 8000 BC, long before written history, its builders filled in the circles with rubble and sand. This wasn't erosion or neglect, it was an intentional act of preservation. Archaeologists call it backfilling, but the motivation remains a mystery. Why would anyone hide something so extraordinary? Some researchers believe the people of Göbekli Tepe buried their temple to protect it from outsiders or to mark the end of a sacred era. Others suggest something deeper, that they foresaw a catastrophe. Geological evidence shows that the region experienced abrupt climate shifts and massive floods as the last ice age ended. In that context, sealing their temple might have been an act of survival, a way to preserve knowledge through disaster. Every pillar at Göbekli Tepe bears meaning. Two central monoliths dominate each circle, facing each other like guardians. Carvings on them depict abstract symbols, H-shapes, crescents, and the mysterious handbag motif that later appears in Sumer, Egypt, and even Central America. These repeating symbols suggest a continuity of ideas spanning continents, as if fragments of a shared memory survived the flood and reappeared wherever human culture rebuilt. Excavations nearby revealed sister sites, Karahan Tepe and Neveli Chori, sharing the same design principles and age. Together, they form part of what archaeologists now call the Taş Tepeler culture, a network of prehistoric sanctuaries built thousands of years before the rise of agriculture in Mesopotamia. Their builders possessed not only advanced stoneworking skills, but a worldview centered on renewal, the death and rebirth of worlds. If we connect the evidence, Göbekli Tepe may represent the culmination of an older, now vanished tradition. The same obsession with cycles, light and darkness, flood and drought, sky and earth, appears here with sophistication far beyond its supposed time. It's as if the site's architects were the last inheritors of knowledge carried through the chaos of the Great Flood. When archaeologists uncovered the enclosures, they noticed something haunting. The carvings showed animals not just of local fauna, but species long extinct in the region. Aurochs, wild boars, and vultures feeding on human forms. Some researchers interpret this as a remembrance of extinction, a warning carved in mythic imagery. The temple could have served as both a memorial and a message, a record of what had been lost. The decision to bury it may have been the builder's way of ensuring that message would endure. And it did. For over 10 millennia, the site remained sealed, perfectly preserved beneath the earth, untouched by weather or war. Only in our own era did it re-emerge, as if time itself had decided to return the memory. Göbekli Tepe challenges not just our history, but our sense of continuity. It stands as proof that human intelligence, spirituality, and architecture existed at a level of sophistication long before agriculture or writing. Its very existence bridges myth and science, suggesting that what we call the beginning of civilization was, in truth, a return. If the Great Flood marked the boundary between worlds, Göbekli Tepe sits precisely on that line, the last monument of the age before water reshaped the earth and the first of the age that followed. The question that remains is not how they built it, but why they buried it. What did they fear, and what did they hope to preserve? In the next and final part, we return to the flood itself, the force that erased so much and yet connected all that remained. We will trace how water became both destroyer and memory, turning the story of the ancient world into the story of time itself. When the last ice age ended, the planet changed faster than any civilization could understand. Ice sheets collapsed, oceans rose, and entire coastlines vanished. Within a few generations, fertile plains became seafloor and mountains turned to islands. For those who lived through it, the flood was not myth. It was memory. Every ancient culture preserved that memory in its own way. The deluge of Gilgamesh, Noah's Ark, Deucalion's raft, the legend of Yu the Great. Science now calls it the Younger Dryas, a rapid climate shift that brought fire, then flood. Geology, myth, and archaeology all trace their origins to the same horizon of destruction. When the waters receded, the survivors began again. They built calendars in stone, Göbekli Tepe, Newgrange, Rujm el Hiri, monuments that turned the sky into a clock. Time itself became the new god. The flood had taken their world, so they measured the heavens to make sure it would never be forgotten again. Perhaps that is why the megaliths still stand. They were not only temples, but warnings. Every alignment, every carving, every circle of stone whispered the same truth. Remember what happened when the waters rose. Modern archaeology calls it coincidence, but when the same geometry, the same myths, and the same fear of the sea appear across continents, coincidence begins to sound like denial. Something happened, and we still live in its aftermath. If the flood marked the end of one world, it also began another, the age of remembering. Water became time, stone became memory, and what survived was not a civilization, but the intent to endure. Maybe that's why we keep searching the ocean floor, scanning for ruins, for answers, for confirmation that the stories were real. Because if we find them, it changes everything we think we know about where we came from and what might come again. If these mysteries stir something in you, let it. Leave a like, share your thoughts, and tell us. Do you believe the flood erased humanity's first civilization, or revealed the beginning of our own?